Hi, I'm Adam Ward. I'm the founder of What If It Was True, a nonprofit dedicated to sharing the gospel with every resident in the Columbus area. I wanted to summarize our last two for Columbus meetings so that we could all be on the same page for our January 30th meeting. Last summer, several organizations got together and said, what if we brought together Christian leaders from all across our city to focus on gospel-based flourishing of our city? That resulted in our October 10th meeting at Xenos Community Church, where we said, what if we worked together? What would it look like? We had representatives, over 120 people came, representatives from congregation. We had representatives from parachurch ministries, and we had representatives from the marketplace, Christian business leaders. I started off a time of forgiveness, apologizing to each other for how we have been viewing each other and not cooperating the way we could. It was a great time of reconciliation. After that, Bishop Clark, who's been a pastor in the Columbus area for nearly 40 years, challenged us on a passage from Ephesians 4 on what unity was and what it required, and he talked about diversity and maturity. If we're going to be united, then we're going to have to be diverse and we're going to have to be mature. Following up that, I did a bunch of statistics on Ohio and Columbus. So I'm just going to draw a quick map of Columbus, 270 there, 71, a couple of these other roads. We have in this area about 2.2 million people. So significant population here. If we look at Ohio, we're number 2 in opioids. We're number 5 in human trafficking. But even within our city, there are a bunch of issues that we don't fare so well in. A fifth of our population's in poverty, with some areas over 50%. We have 500,000 people that don't know where their next meal is coming from. There's a lot of health issues in our city where we're equivalent to a third world country. 250,000 people or more have never heard the gospel. If we look at the population relative to church attendance, we're decreasing at 1% annually. That would fill Ohio Stadium every 4 years. So that's a staggering number. Last year, Barna conducted some research, joint research with Alpha USA, and there were 4 things they identified. If people saw 2 or more churches collaborating to help the community, if they had an improved reputation of the church, if they had more evidence on Christianity, and if they had an eye-opening spiritual experience. Those 4 things overwhelmingly open people to the gospel. So you can see how for Columbus movement, us collaborating across these borders, Big C Church can address these issues and open people up to the gospel. Now, once that happens, there's a couple of things that they're very receptive to. One-on-one conversations, casual conversations about faith, and small group casual conversations about faith. However, there's 2 requisites. We can't come from a judgmental standpoint, and we can't expect a conclusion or having them make a decision at the end of that. So if we can follow this, if we can address these barriers, then Alpha said in their study, nationwide, including Columbus, people will be open to the gospel, and we should be able to shift up this percent of people who are not interested in the church anymore. So on 1010, we said, all right, 2030, if we're flourishing, what does it look like in our city? And we said, if you could define flourishing, what would it be? And then what are the barriers that got in the way or are getting in the way right now of us flourishing? And then what are the next steps that we can take to address those barriers? We had over 800 comments, 4,000 words of feedback, but flourishing, without a doubt, was getting people to experience God. And not just 1 or 2 groups or people around the area, but that everyone could experience Him. Now, we have 82% of our city growth comes from 4 countries: India, Mexico, China, and Somalia. None of those countries are gospel-based, and Somalia, in fact, is nearly 100% Muslim. So we need a way, if we're going to flourish, to have every single person, including these immigrants, refugees, people born here, to experience God. The barriers, us as leaders reflected and said, what is it that's preventing this? And the overwhelming evidence came to self, us, our pride, our tribalism, our denominationalism. So if we can address self, we should be able to flourish. So what are the next steps? Overwhelmingly, the number one thing that we said is we need to pray together. So we got together again on December 3rd. We shifted the location to the inner city. We met at Mount Olivet Baptist Church. 120, more than 120 leaders again showed up. We sat in tables again, and we talked about self and prayer. And what are the things that we need to do so that we can fix those things? And the overwhelming came out was, how can we do prayer? How can we do it together? How can we do it across these circles? How can we get together humbly and pray? And then how can we collaborate? So how can we take practical steps to work across these boundaries, to impact these cities, to address these issues, to open people up to evangelism, so that we can have conversations, so that we can shift this line, and that we would see a flourishing in our city. I like to think of it as the second a person gets off a plane in Columbus, they feel the difference. And we know in this first meeting and this second meeting that we have a coalition, because at the end of this meeting, we asked people, look at this spirit of agreement. It's a simple document, basic theological position, and basic say, hey, let's do a gospel approach to improve the city. 80% of the organization said, count me in, put me in a centralized database. We want to pray together. We want to collaborate together. So now we have this January 30th meeting where we're going to dive deeper into that, and then April 2nd, and we're hoping that these organizations will develop relationships, will establish communication, lines of communication between everybody, that we can have a simple way to get a hold of everybody, and that we can see by 2030 that we're a flourishing city, that everyone can experience God.